Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. I made a video yesterday talking about Turki Al-Sheikh and how he might lose patience with a lot of these US fighters because they're either, well, in the case of Teofimo Lopez, he's been very insulting. Devin Haney stanked the joint out in his last fight, looked scared to get hit. They just don't seem to be making any effort. Ryan Garcia didn't turn up, against Rolly Romero. And I was saying, is Turkey going to sort of say, the hell with this, I've had enough of you, and not put any money into US boxing? Well, I was quite critical of a lot of US fighters, and some of the American guys who subscribe to the channel left comments, saying, well, hang on a minute, you're not right about this, you're not right about that. Some of those comments, in fact, most of them actually were, very reasonable. And in the spirit of fairness, obviously, with this channel, we like to be objective. I think, they deserve to be mentioned. Now, first of all, one of the guys who left the comment said, look, in America, we value freedom. Okay, well, yes, they do, because I was talking about it. And sometimes it's a word that's used, I think, erroneously to describe certain social or political situations. It's done in the name of freedom. Okay, right. Well, I do get it, though. I do get that everything from freedom of speech to freedom of or liberty, if you like, to take your skills wherever you want to, you should be free. Of course, many Americans, everyday Americans, are not free because their situation means they have to take crumbs off the banquet table and not sit at the banquet table. And is it the same, or should it be the same for boxers? Of course not. Boxers should be allowed to move from one promoter to the other. Obviously, if you sign a contract, you have to honour it. But at the same time, there should be options, because in order for any, capitalistic system to work, you need checks and balances. You need competition. Otherwise, it becomes a cartel at best, and at worst, a monopoly. Well, the guy, I don't know whether, I've got a subscriber called Paul Daniels. I wonder if it was him that said this. Anyway, whoever it was who said it said, look, they don't want to be aligned to Al-Sheikh. They don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to be, they don't want to be employees. They want to be more like freelancers. And that, I think, is a really good thing. And I should at this point out, as I have done in the past, that I have made many videos criticising Turki Al-Sheikh. I was one of the first people who said that if you have any concentrated power, it's always a bad thing. If you've only got one person or a couple of people controlling everything, that's bad. That's obviously bad. It's not, the one thing it isn't is democratic. So I understand the argument perfectly that freedom, yes, freedom to own yourself and your skills and your talents is imperative. Totally agree with that. Yeah. So that's a good point, I think, that was made. And maybe they don't want to be aligned with Al-Sheikh. Maybe they, like I say, they don't want to be employees. They want to be, in charge of their own destiny, so to speak. Perfectly laudable thing to want. And then we come to some of the fighters. I was very critical about some of the fighters. And again, I don't know whether it was the same subscriber, but a few people said, well, you're not being fair, because if you look at Teofimo Lopez, apart from fighting Arnold Barbosa and beating an undefeated fighter in his last fight, he beat Jermaine Ortiz, he beat Josh Taylor, who was undefeated at the time. He beat Vasily Lomachenko. I mean, that's not to be sneezed at, And he did beat him as well, regardless of whether Lomachenko had a shoulder injury, which he claimed. I mean, his resume isn't bad for a guy with 23 fights. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree. Those are good wins, very good wins. And my criticism of Teo, as I said in my previous video, I mean, in that awful Times Square card, he was the only one that came out with any sort of credibility, because his performance against Barbosa Jr. was very good. He looked really, really good. But he's kind of not exactly ingratiating himself, is he, with people, with some of his comments, particularly about race. And obviously he crossed swords with Al Sheikh, and he was going to fight Haney, now he's not, and all that business. Well, purely on the resume side of things, yeah, I agree with the subscriber who commented. Yes, his resume, even though he's kind of had a stop-start career a little bit. I mean, he fought twice in 2024, and then I think only once in 23, if I remember rightly. 23 was the Josh Taylor fight, and then he had Steve Claggett. He fought him in 24 as well, and Ortiz, I think, in 24. So I'd like to see him busier, but okay, his resume ain't bad. And then we come to Devin Haney. And Devin Haney, again, has achieved a lot because he was the undisputed lightweight champ. I mentioned this in my previous video. I said his achievements are good. To become undisputed lightweight champ and to do it by, going halfway across the world to Australia to fight Kambosos twice, that's not bad. That ain't a bad. That's pretty good damn form, And even though his chin, I don't think, is cast iron, obviously, he hasn't ducked anyone. He's looked for tough fights. He took on Ryan. He agreed to fight him when Ryan came in 3 pounds overweight. Ryan cheated with the peds. So, am I being too hard on Haney? Well, it wasn't so much his resume and I did mention his achievements in the past. It is the fact that he is boring to watch. And someone said, again, another subscriber said, oh, you sound like a casual saying that. He's, saying that he's a runner. I didn't say he's a runner. He's not a runner. Not per se. But against Ramirez, who posed very little threat, or so it seemed. He looked way past his best, Ramirez. Yeah, Haney did run. He did run, he did hold, he was moving. He was scared of getting hit in that particular fight, not in general. And as far as him being boring is concerned, it's just personal taste. I always found him. I mean, yes, technically he's very good. He is very good when he's on it. I don't deny that. I never denied that. But entertainment-wise, if you want the big bucks, unfortunately, and I'm no capitalist, never have been. But if you want the big money in a capitalist, supply and demand model, then you've got to provide entertainment. And I don't think he does provide maximum entertainment. And therefore, it's rather fanciful for him to say, well, I deserve colossal amounts of money. Well, is anyone buying are people buying your tickets, If they're not, then you've got to take what, it's supply and demand. It's whether people want to part with their money or not. There are plenty of I don't believe in pay-per-views. I think they're necessary for boxing. I think the elite fighters, the very elite fighters, should take less money so that fans can see more fights without them being stuck behind a paywall. But there are pay-per-views that have sold massive amounts. So I have to say, as someone who doesn't even believe in pay-per-views, well, I suppose it was justified because people were parting with their money. Sometimes the end result is not what we want. It's not what we believe in. Someone else mentioned Tank Davis. Now, Tank Davis is someone, and again, I'm repeating what I've said before, but someone who I think is extremely talented and has underachieved. He's underachieved because he doesn't like fights that are at least 50-50. He certainly doesn't. He certainly doesn't want to be the underdog against anyone. I mean, a few people have said if you look at Floyd Mayweather, when he was Pretty Boy Floyd, which is by far the more entertaining of his two careers, because he essentially had two careers. One as Pretty Boy Floyd, the next as Money May. When he was Pretty Boy Floyd, sometimes he was the B-side. He was the B-side against De La Hoya. But his attitude was, I don't care. I'm going to beat you, and then I'm going to be the A-side. And eventually he went on to be the A-side and make hundreds of millions of dollars. The fighters, whether we're talking Lopez, whether we're talking Haney, whether we're talking Tank in particular, you can't be the A-side unless you have proven yourself. unless you have earned it, unless you have sold, a vast amount of pay-per-views, if that's the system you want, which it clearly is, unless people are talking about you, unless you've in a sense transcended the sport. Because pay-per-view used to be for people that were, like when Mike Tyson was in his pomp and circumstance, the majority of people knew who he was. Many of them hated boxing, but they knew who Mike Tyson was. A lot of them had no interest in boxing, but they knew who Mike Tyson was. And so he did transcend the sport, and therefore he was able to make, astronomical amounts of money that would, even nowadays, 35 years later, would seem massive. So, and as I said before, I just want to reiterate something else. I said this in the previous video. Look, I grew up watching American fighters, and most, or at least many of my fistic heroes are Americans. And, America has a very rich, extremely deep history, legacy in boxing. They produce some astonishing fighters. Fighters that actually propelled the sport forward as well. They weren't just great in their own right. They propelled the sport forward. Now, I want to see American boxing back at the top. To me, there's plenty of room on the plateau for everyone to sit on top. So if the British scene is great, if the Australian scene is great, the Japanese scene at the moment is flying. I want to see everyone on top, because that way we get more great fighters, we get more great fights, and boxing thrives. Okay. So I'm not taking any delight at all in saying that I think this is a down period, a down era for US boxing. Not entirely. There are still some very good American fighters, but I want to see them back up near the top again. So that's really what I'm saying. And as far as Turki Al-Sheikh is concerned, let me repeat, you can go back and look at them if you want. I made videos when he first came on the scene saying, all that glitters might not be gold. I'm very, very skeptical of Turki and the people behind him and his motivations. But if you don't care about the politics, the social issues, the human rights and all that, and you just want good fights, you can't knock some of the cards he's put on. They've been quite extraordinary. So, yeah, just a few further thoughts. Let me know what you think. I'm always interested to read your comments. And thank you very much for watching the video. If you liked it, you could hit the like button. That'd be great. And also subscribe to the channel. Spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. And let's build the channel up. It makes sense. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot. Enjoy your day. Bye for now.